And so we'll finish this second segment on let's say LLMs with a fireside chat with Brenton House, who is an API evangelist, who is a YouTube influencer now, right, with a great YouTube channel, and also an experienced and an expert on APIs and API management. Hello, Brenton. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us for apidays interface. We will try to kind of wrap up maybe I don't know if you have listened to the 10 talks we had on LLMs and APIs and stuff, but you know your topic too. The thing is, it's coming, it's there, but API management is also there. LLMs, they're really how you consume LLMs, how you protect your API, and how do you integrate these LLMs, how you distribute your content and your APIs into LLMs. So there are many things we can talk about, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about you, what are you currently doing, and also what you are, where we can find more of your content and videos.
Oh, sure. Well, I can start off. I've been in the API game for like 25 some years right now. I've worked on everything from mobile apps to cybersecurity and even AI, and all of it shows like how APIs have been this core essential part of digital transformation, how businesses are transforming over the years. And I mean, we're to the point now where obviously we have conferences on APIs. I mean, APIs now, especially with AI becoming more of a public-facing thing with ChatGPT going public, the word API has been used a lot more by people that have never used that word before. And so not only in the business world, but we're seeing it everywhere. So I'm really excited about being able to chat about how this intersection of API management, AI, and LLMs, and how it all kind of goes together. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and maybe we will start by we had a lot of people defining LLMs this morning, but like let's say if we go back, we're an API conference. We're talking about LLMs, but we're an API conference. So maybe you can start. What would be your definition about API management? How would you define API management?
I mean, I guess to keep it kind of simple, API management as core is just kind of about building, designing, deploying everything about an API and doing all of that securely. So all the stages of an API are really part of API management. And I mean, a lot of the focus on API management gets put on the latter part, because once your APIs are in production, a lot of that managing, setting up policies, doing different things to make sure that they're working right. But really, you have to start from the beginning of an API to make sure that by the time you're at the end in production, that you can manage it correctly. So, I mean, there's a lot of different definitions, and as you know, I mean, places like Gartner and others, you start kind of change the definition as things mature, businesses change, APIs change. You almost start changing the definition. We've seen in the last couple of years of even what API management means to analysts like Gartner.
Yeah, no, thank you for this definition. Then my question will be like, with the previous speaker, I asked this question, and so to put the business first before diving into APIs and LLM. 20 years ago, most marketers used to say, if you're not crawled by Google and by search engines, you don't exist. If you don't allow your website to be crawled, nobody will go by your email address. They will go from the search engine research, and that they will index you and find you, right? So if LLMs are the next UI, or text is the next UI at some point, whatever the LLM, ChatGPT or Mistral or Bloom or whatever, or Bing Chat and others, will you exist if you don't let your website or APIs consumed by LLMs? That's the question. I would love to have your opinion on that.
Oh, this is huge. And And I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know our focus is on APIs and AIs, but this is going to be absolutely huge and disruptive. And I started doing a couple of new video series kind of on even on AI and touching on a lot of marketing because it's such a big impact on every business. But yes, you had to be indexed by Google before. You had people whose their sole job was to define how you could best create SEO, make sure that your site was picked up. Your goal was to be in the top 10 of the search results. And now all of a sudden, within a year, I'm guessing everything is going to change. And you kind of wonder, like, why now? I mean, Google's had the best of AI minds for years and years. And the reason is not only is it going to change search results, but it's going to change search ads. And that's probably a big reason that Google kind of postponed releasing anything similar to like ChatGPT or Bard until now, until they were kind of their hands was forced, was because they make a lot of money in Google ads, and that this is going to change ads as well. So what does it mean to be indexed by an LLM? I mean, a lot of it with some of the models, you don't even know if your information is in the LLM. I mean, there's all the legality around now about is copyrighted stuff in there? Where did they get their sources of information? But with some of the open models of LLMs, I think that's going to be a little more transparent, hopefully, with what information is going in there. But then you're also going to have private LLM. So, I mean, you're going to take a base model, and then I think I would forecast that within a couple of years, it's going to be essential for businesses to have their own LLM, their own model that they take a base model, because I mean, it takes a lot of money to build the big models, but then take that base model and start building it with your own information that you can use for your business. That's very specific to either your industry or your organization. And that is going to be a huge benefit to organizations as well. So, but that won't necessarily be public facing. But I think the question still is, how do you make sure that your information that you put on your that you have out there gets picked up by, say, ChatGPT or Bard or one of the other models? Because, or if it does, how can you make sure that your brand is seamlessly interwoven into the answer so that it stands out, that your brand, you don't lose all your branding just because you put some information on the website? So I think you've hit on a really key topic that I know I'm going to be watching really closely.
Yeah, so from search engine optimization, SEO, to LLM AO, like a large language model answer optimization, or something like that. I don't know, but it will be something. So it's just to put the stage right about like why it may be important then to mix your APIs with that. But then let's talk about the first part. The first part is what we call, what you used to call integration, like how you can integrate third-party services or even sometimes your own legacy services into your new product. Right. I love the fact that APIs are no product, so we talk about consumption. We consume APIs sometimes when they are really delightful. We consume them, we don't integrate them. But the thing is, then on an API management perspective, what would you advise? What do you think we need to consider when we need to consume these ChatGPT APIs, maybe future Google Bard APIs, or all these LLM APIs? Like about all what they bring into our system, about, and all the problems that can come with it, right?
Right. So I think all of this push especially for generative AI, and as you know, a lot of the stuff about ChatGPT, I mean, they had their, say, a plugin system that's about taking external information and bringing it and say into ChatGPT. But you have the other side, which is you have that huge and more powerful GPT API, along with some of the other AI APIs, that people are going to want AI in their app almost more than they want their app inside their AI, like they do with the GPT plugins. So it's going to be even more essential that your data is accessible by APIs. So although we've had for years a big push of, hey, you need to make sure your data is in APIs because that's how machines talk to each other. That's how apps talk to each other with the smartphone growth and everything. That, I mean, they all use APIs. But now, not only are you going to have to make sure that you can reach out and talk to the say GPT API and other APIs, you're going to have to make sure that others that are using it can access your data if they want to intermix the information from GPT API, say, with your information. So some of the AI APIs become a lot smarter when they have context. And as a business, you want to make sure that your data is the context that people use. And the only way to really do that is to have your data exposed as APIs. But having it as an API is only the first step. So as you mentioned, API management. Well, there's a whole range of things that if you're just getting into APIs that you need to be aware of. I mean, nobody wants to be in the headlines because their API was hacked. So cybersecurity is super important. Security of your APIs is super important. But you have other things. You're going to have rate limiting. I mean, take some of the Substack and some of the other Twitter, some of the API issues that have been going on with putting prices on some of the APIs and starting to monetize their APIs. A big reason for that was because AI had been getting all their information for basically free to kind of populate this model that then they can use. And I think a lot of these organizations suddenly, they don't want to be a free source of information. They want to make some money off this as well. Well, it's going to be important that you have, say, I mean, take a simple thing like rate limiting. If you're going to have a lot of other systems calling your APIs all of a sudden because of AI, well, you're going to need to make sure that you limit the calls to your APIs so that your system's not taken offline or your resources and your costs go through the roof because you didn't anticipate all this use of your API.
Yeah, no, that's that's an opportunity, but that's also really scary to think that now an AI can consume your data, or at large scale because of people requests or because of a trend or because of people asking all the same thing at the same time or whatever. But there is also a question about like how, if you mix your internal data, if you give internal data as a context, do you consider today that the real safety, security, confidentiality, it's guaranteed or secured enough to do it, or do large LLM API providers need still to give some proof that they really are able to keep the context locally?
Well, I mean, in general, my suggestion, having investigated and worked in some of the cybersecurity for years, is don't trust anybody, and make sure that make sure your data is safe and secure. And that's why a lot of the organizations, and you take your governments, you take your big corporations, they're going to be working very hard to make sure that they can move some of the models on-prem and work where they can control the environment, the data, the model. And even if it costs them a lot more, they need that because they can't risk having their trade secrets and other things released. I mean, I know we've already had a few headlines in the news of companies of employees using, say, ChatGPT or other some of the AI interfaces and putting in some confidential information that somehow shows up after it was used to train some data. So I think, yes, you do have to be super worried about securing your data. And if you're using that information, you got to be careful what you give it. So maybe taking information and combining the context of it on your own on-prem or I know some of the big providers, AWS and some of the others, are providing like private cloud models and some other things that I think we'll see how those work and how you're able to contain your data. But I'm always be very wary if what's the risk if your data is exposed, what's the liability and cost to your company, and can you handle that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, hard to answer. But our discussion reminds me about the data lake kind of discussion that's happened like in the last 10 years, with really someone who is in charge to make sure the data that comes into the data lake is sometimes anonymized, or at least compliant, or that has the right refinement. To be sure that it complies with the ability to request it later, right?
Right.
So do you think we will have like AI trainers internally, like someone in charge of say, okay, this is what you can put in the local LLM, let's call it like that, the local instance, and I will be in charge of training it with the right data and being sure. So nobody will be allowed to train it on their own, but they will have this governance, this training governance, to be sure that it's trained in a way that it respects security, confidentiality, and regulations.
Oh, I definitely think that, because look at all over the years, I mean, that we've had databases, and all of a sudden, I mean, people realizing that your data, if you put data in your database and it was exposed at some point, it's like, oh wow, maybe that was data we should have never put in the database, or we should have never been storing. Well, can you imagine now in another year or two, when it isn't databases that are being leaked online, it's models. And if someone gets access to a model that you trained internally, you got to make sure that, well, one, you put security around your model, but two, you got to make sure that the data that's going in there is really data that you want used. Because in the end, you don't really know. You may be training a model, but you don't know who the end consumer of that model is going to be. Even if it's an internal one, it might be a different department, a different a partner at some point. And if you put in things that you really didn't want exposed, maybe you start segmenting models, and maybe, I mean, there's going to be a whole career paths of people whose job is to probably make sure that data is proper to go into models. And yes, I agree. That's going to be a super important role as well.
Like being the best trainer, right? That will be,
Right.
So,
I know.
Yeah. But so what you say is that, imagine you're a large corporation, because it's so easy. I'm just talking recently. I was talking to large law firms who are asking me and everyone, like, does uploading a document to an LLM for analysis, a contract for analyzing the clause, is it breaking client attorney privilege? That's a question I think it's impossible to answer right now. But what you say is that it's large organization. The CEO may upload something, and if you don't contain the information, at some point the LLM can answer that from any employee questions. That's quite scary.
Yeah, it is. So I think that trainer role that you kind of described, you might want to trademark that, like some kind of AI trainer role, because I think that's going to be really important to sifting through the data to make sure that only the data you want and the sources of data that you want go in there. Because like outside of there, I mean, by country and region, you have different, I mean, when Adobe's doing their model, they were very specific that we're not putting copyright data into our model, so that we can provide some kind of guarantee. If you're using this, you're not using copyright data. And then you have other ends of the spectrum, that's like Japan, who really recently had a ruling that it's okay. You can put wherever you want in a model. You can put copyright stuff. It doesn't matter. So you have two extremes that are going to be out there. And if you're using something as a base model and you want to make sure that it complies with whatever the policy is for your organization, as far as copyright, so that so it's not just what you put into the model, it's also what was in the model that you got from the start.
Yeah, so it's funny if Japan has this kind of law. I know some entrepreneurs who may wants to immigrate to Japan, right? So model immigration, like so yeah. But then if LLM are also a way to distribute your data, like you talked about rate limiting, sometimes maybe security, sometimes there's maybe some personal information like PII, or like what would you advise as a good API management practice to, for example, build a plugin, to build a plugin for an LLM?
So if you're not already, if you don't have some kind of API management set up already, and you're all of a sudden creating an API to be able to use with artificial intelligence, some of the generative AI, it's very important that, you start focusing on your API management and say an API gateway, because setting up a policy to filter some of that data is going to be very important, especially now. So say before you had an API that leaked some information that maybe it wasn't critical, but it probably you were kind of giving out more information than you should have in your API. Well, that's one thing, but now all of a sudden, say you have a large corporation that's going to look at all your APIs and use all of your data to train its model. Well, now that's like a permanent record inside their model. So if you put too much information in there, that's a problem. So that's one of the benefits of API management, in addition to, say, rate limiting and some of the other cybersecurity things, is being able to self-filter like composite data, integrating with other APIs, but then only making sure that exactly the data that you want to go out is the data that's going out, in addition to who is it going to. So not just a general, hey, we have a password on our API, but role-based security for your API to make sure that someone who shouldn't have access to this API doesn't have access to it. So many of the headlines that are about APIs being breached, a lot of times are because someone logged in with one username and password, but suddenly had access to data, a lot more data than they should have because of that.
But then there's the question about, like, if my customers wants to consume my services through an LLM, like I cannot have just one key for the LLM, so I need to be sure that the maybe the user will put the API key into the LLM, or that may cause some serious issue about, like, key proliferation, or because you cannot treat the full LLM as a one big user. Some of your own customer or own API consumer wants to use that interface versus your interface. So yeah, you will need to have this delegation that can be problematic. They will be kind of a back end of your there will be opportunities to actually build this new authorization layer.
Yeah, and we may have new definitions for what that looks like now. It may get a lot more complex than what it used to be with users and groups and roles and things like that. Maybe now there could be a more complex authorization and authentication systems in place now because of AI.
And also, the temperature, the fact that the LLM is able to generate more probabilistic stuff or not. So sometimes even go to hallucination when it's too much. But yeah, do you think we will also have this temperature rate limiting? Like being sure at some point you say, okay, I accept my data to imagine you're a trusted source like government or whatever.
Okay.
But you say, okay, I don't want my data to go to an LLM or a request where temperature is more than 0.7, because it may fake stuff. I just want really low temperature, like low generation, because I want to be a real source. So yeah, API management will change at some point.
Yeah, and it may also change not only with API management, but this may force a change eventually, or maybe it is already, of what it means to what is temperature and what is our allowable ranges for different things when we're generating information. But this is only going to get more and more prevalent in every business, because tools everywhere. I mean, even Microsoft Office and Google products are all integrating generative AI into their products. So whether or not you want to use AI, there's a high probability that you're going to be using AI, whether you want to or not, here coming very soon.
And maybe we can finish by something more AI in API management. For example, in API security, some AI threat modeling, to analyze the traffic and stuff. Did you see some interesting stuff, on API definition generation, or documentation generation or stuff like that? So did you see anything compelling yet, or some interesting initiatives?
So there's definitely API security tools that are using AI to kind of analyze traffic. Now, whether there's also a separate side of that too, that are using like LLMs to generate code so that it can understand how to process things, maybe dynamic policies, reacting to the information it's already getting. So you have different forms of AI kind of that I think are going to start working together a little bit more, along with the human side of things, which I always say AI is great right now, but it really still requires a subject matter expert if you're using something like generative AI. Doesn't matter if you're looking at code, video, images, whatever. You have to have someone that knows, is this right or wrong, before you place a high trust on it. So you're going to have people, experts, cybersecurity experts, be able to do much more, so they can 10x their work, if you will, because of the AI and starting to integrate some of that into the security products.
Yeah, no, that's what you say about the need of an expert. Like, I don't know if we have enough experts right now. So they can totally bargain their and negotiate well their revenues, because I don't think we have enough. But no, I totally agree with you. Knowing what we do in that space, having someone who really know what he does or what she does is extremely important, because it can be massive impact. It can have massive impact, and we don't know at the end what the machine the LLM as a machine, right? But is doing at the end, right? We
Right.
understand how it works a little bit, but sometimes we don't understand the hallucination or stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there is great. If we wrap up, we say that LLM can be a huge opportunity, at least for augmenting the intelligence of your apps, because your consumers will want AI into their apps, or maybe because you want to appear in the LLM results, right? So that's
Right.
a huge opportunity, right? We say that organization needs to consume and need to learn how to integrate, as we say all the time. So they have this integration, these third-party policies, maybe a integration platform as a service for LLMs, but they need also to mix their current API management practice to LLM about rate limiting, or being sure when the data is shared is always shared in the right context, right?
Right. Yep. And to keep learning. I mean, don't put off looking at how AI is going to affect your APIs and your API management and everything else. And closing, I'll just throw out there, I started a new YouTube series, Man versus Machine, which kind of is a focus on talking about AIs and APIs and kind of how those worlds are mixed. So it'd be interesting to see. It's an interesting subject that I think is going to go on for quite a while now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We reached the time we had. Thank you very much, Brenton. Again, what's the name of your YouTube channel, so we can
you can go to youtube.com /Brenton House.
Brenton House, easy to remember.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Brenton, and see you at next apidays conference.
All right. Thank you.